Good.
Doubling up. Roger roll, Atlantis.
Water towers, fly!
Echo Delta nominal.
Flight downside speed off. Bring in speed off.
Yikes. You bet. Okay. We don't need any more of these.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another week's episode of NASA Spaceflight Live. I'm Jack Beyer with NASASpaceflight, of course, and I'm joined this week by, on my left, I guess, Chris G. What's up, Chris Gebhardt?
Hey. Oh,
I was just going to say, Assistant Managing Editor of NASA Spaceflight. I always like to give you your title because it sounds so fancy.
no. and I just hear, how are you doing? And I'm like, I want to answer that and have a conversation, Jack. I'm doing good. How about yourself?
No complaints. And on my right is / left. I don't even know anymore. Is Thomas. What's up, Thomas Burghardt? News manager? Is that what it is?
News director.
News director. I know I was getting that word wrong.
It's not that important, but how's it going?
It's going. So we've got a lot of fun stuff this week. I see some 5x5s in chat, so I know chat can hear us all right. Thank you all for doing that. You know the drill by now. I don't even need to say it. And what I will say, though, is that if you have questions, don't forget, at NASASpaceflight in chat, and that way we will be able to see what your question is. So just type @NASASpaceflight and then put your question, and then you can put that in chat. We'll see your question pop up. Pro tip, if you want your question answered, probably a good idea to ask a question at the time that we're discussing a certain thing. Like, if we're talking about SLS and you ask a Starship question, we're probably not going to get to it right then. So we might get to it at some point, but just, throwing that out there. Try and ask relevant questions to the topic of discussion at hand. But with
NSF Live Q&A tips and tricks from Jack.
Yeah, right. I'll do a webinar later. So with that, I think we should jump right into it because we got a pretty action-packed show this week. First up, STP-3, which was a launch that I think we were all on. We were all streaming that one earlier this week, which was some test payloads for the Space Force. Who wants to take that one first?
I think that's going to be the theme and this launch was streamed by the three of us.
Right, yeah, honestly.
For this week. I mean, also, I can sort of give a high-level overview, and Thomas, I know there's a part that you really like about this mission, too, and some new things that the Atlas did itself.
I'm going to give a physics lecture today? Is that what you're saying? Oh, I'm excited now.
I think we are, for two of them, in fact. But yeah, this was the launch of an Atlas V rocket flying in its 551 configuration. Great crackle of the solid rockets during liftoff, but it was taking two satellites for the U.S. Space Force as part of the Space Test Program. This was a STP-3 is what the overall mission was called. Two satellites on board. A lot we don't know about what was on board because, Space Force classified, DoD, hush-hush, secrecy. But we do know that on one of them, there was a NASA laser communication demonstration experiment. And this is a really cool one where they're going to basically aim these lasers down at an experiment that will be attached to the International Space Station next year. And they're going to test how lasers and all the light particles in those lasers can be used to transmit communications across long distances. So really cool, innovative communication thing there. But it was the length of this Atlas mission that was really kind of interesting, wasn't it, Thomas?
Right, so this mission went directly to geosynchronous orbit, which is, to differentiate from geostationary because, there's slight differences in exactly how they take advantage of that kind of orbital altitude, but to be precise there. But that means going to a very high orbit, and it actually involves several different Centaur engine burns on that upper stage, and this is where some cool maneuvering and physics came into play for this particular Atlas mission, and similar physics came into play with the Falcon 9 IXPE mission that we'll talk about a little bit later. But for this mission, Centaur goes into a normal low Earth orbit, kind of parking orbit to begin with, and then once flying over the equator, does this transfer burn that raises the highest point in its orbit out to geosynchronous altitude, and that's where you enter this sort of geosynchronous transfer orbit, which is how most missions to that orbital altitude get there, and then the spacecraft will do the rest of the work. But on this mission, Centaur said, no, I got you. The Centaur will take care of it. And so Centaur and the payloads went all the way out to that altitude, and then Centaur lit again that RL-10 engine and conducted a circularization burn, which also acts as a plane change burn to level out the orbit to fly over the equator rather than at an inclination, which had a couple benefits. First of all, the satellites don't need their own propulsion to do that maneuver and reach an operational orbit, but also those payloads needed to be powered during that entire phase of flight because they weren't going to deploy from the upper stage, deploy their solar panels, and go power positive until over 7 hours after launch. And so the Centaur upper stage actually brought a what's called a mission extension kit, which includes extra power capabilities and things like that, onto the stage so that those spacecraft would stay charged over the course of the launch. So that's something else that was new on that mission. So not the typical Atlas V profile that we usually see, but completely successful mission for the Space Force and ULA.
Indeed, and the payload fairings
Mm,
were a new design as well on this particular mission. Again, they were actually built in Decatur, Alabama, instead of over in Switzerland, which the previous ones had, using a new method called out of autoclave, and that's a long sequence of words that basically means lighter and cheaper and built
yeah.
here. So yeah, some good new and I bring this up because this is kind of interesting, isn't it, Thomas? Like, you don't really see rockets change their overall manufacturers or designs during their lifetimes unless like somebody folds and goes out of business, right? But we've seen the Atlas sort of evolve with new manufacturing methods for its fairings, and also switch a total switch of providers that we're in the process of doing that transition for in their solid rocket motors. So the Atlas is durable and versatile in different ways than we normally think of in rocketry.
Yeah, and the fairings were one of two different parts of Atlas that are actually looking ahead towards the Vulcan launch vehicle, because not only are these new out of autoclave fairings part of the fairings that will be used on Vulcan, but the 5 solid rocket boosters on board, which are these new GEM 63 boosters, which have flown before. This wasn't their very first mission, but are still gaining that flight experience on Atlas prior to being a stretched version on Vulcan. So that's kind of ULA's fly it before you fly it strategy of incorporating some Vulcan hardware on Atlas V missions. So that was another thing to be cool to kind of focus on and was cool about this mission.
Buy it and fly it before you really fly it.
Right.
That's maybe less graceful of an acronym. Look at this picture from Steven, just really quick. I have to shout that out. Steven took some amazing pictures of this launch, and that is what you're looking at. I mean,
Yeah, that pitch kick, because when you have that high thrust to weight
ooh,
ratio vehicle with all 5 solids, if you wait too long to pitch over before you know you're on this really lofted trajectory and you're not going to reach. So when you have a really high thrust vehicle, you pitch over way early.
gotta love it. Let's see really quick. We got a question. What does STP stand for? It's Space Test Program, right?
Yep, and it's a division of the now U.S. Space Force, used to be part of the Air Force, that is primarily dedicated to technology development, experimentation on orbit, for future technologies for future spacecraft and future military missions. Sometimes the SDP has declassified elements, which is why we knew some of the payloads on board this flight. In addition to the NASA one that Chris talked about, there was also a nuclear detonation instrumentation suite that can detect nuclear tests from orbit in a slightly different way than the SBIRS constellation that's already out there can do, and things like that. And they actually talked a little bit about that. It's one of the payloads on board. There are also plenty of payloads that we will probably never hear about, but SDP is on the less classified side of some of the Space Force missions that gets launched.
And just like you had taken a moment there to brag about the previous photo, Jack, I want to take a moment to highlight this one. I mean, look at that photograph. You have the flame of the RD-180 clearly visible in between the flames of the solid rocket motors.
Yeah, that image
Expert shot.
is perfectly exposed. Way to go, Steven. Let's see. Here's a question. I don't know if you might need to be more specific. Questioner M Ford. I'm not sure we're gonna be able to answer this, but we'll give it a try. They're asking, what was the thing hanging out of the fairing? And that's
Yeah.
Okay, I missed this. What was this?
If we go back to the previous photo, actually, I think it was Julia's photo, liftoff photo, shows it best, Michael. I know Chris knows exactly what it is, so I'll let him answer.
Yeah. Okay. So when the Atlas V is in its five configuration with a 5-meter diameter payload fairing, The entire Centaur upper stage is encased within the fairing. So all of your data, electrical, umbilical lines, and hydrogen vent lines have to go in through the fairing, and then for the hydrogen vent line has to come back out through the fairing. Most everything stays on the umbilical tower and just falls away from the Atlas like that, but the hydrogen vent line um, actually goes with the payload fairing as the vehicle lifts off. So that is what that was.
Interesting. So that's a nominal thing. It's just going for a ride.
Exactly. Yep. And there's usually always a conversation about it. Just because it's so visible on the Atlas, but it is a very common thing. Yep.
In all my years of rocket launchery, which is a word, I guess, uh, I've never noticed that. How have I never noticed that? That's insane.
It's one of those things that honestly, I didn't notice it either until somebody asked the question. And then I was like, oh yeah, there is something hanging off the side of it. But
Well, my
uh
apologies, M. Ford. I was. You do not need to be any more specific with your question. That was the exact right amount of specification. Really good question. How I'm like I'm. It's like a Mandela effect kind of thing right now. Like, is it Shazam or Kazam? Uh,
yeah.
I'm dying here. I never noticed that. That's absolutely wild. Really good question there. I almost didn't ask it. I'm glad I did. Let's see. What else we got here? So we talked about one of the experiments on there is going to be laser communication. Peter is asking, does Starlink not already use laser comms? I think that's more about it's just because there is a user of laser communication in orbit doesn't necessarily mean there's nothing left to test, or it still makes sense to include that on a test payload, right? To figure that stuff out, and it's not like it's a solved problem. It's a relatively new technology.
It is, and I would say that the primary difference here is that the Starlink laser interconnectivity for communication is between the satellites in low Earth orbit. What we're talking about here is laser communication from geostationary orbit down to the planet. So much greater distances involved in this type of communication test that's on the STP-3 payload versus versus what has already been tested in orbit and what is currently flying. But it's also worth noting that there are a lot of other small CubeSat missions and small sat missions that when you dig down really deep through our archive that we've got of them, you can find some other instances of laser communication demonstrations in the last several years that have gone up, specifically on a few Rocket Lab missions, actually.
Hmm.
Interesting. Here's one which I think I know the answer to, which, spoiler, is yes. But King is asking, I don't know how to pronounce your
Hold
name.
on. I just want you to just answer the question without reading what question you're answering, and then we'll just move on.
Yes.
King Zoo is asking a question. The answer is yes. Let's move on. No, they're asking if SRBs have plume expansion. That's a function of just
Oh yeah.
the atmosphere and pressure as you ascend, right? That's basically any
Mhm.
rocket engine is going to have expansion.
Yep. Any rocket engine will do that.
Yeah, Atlas is not a good one to look at for that. But however, this question has been asked, so here comes the answer. Go look at, go find specifically the STS-117 launch video, long-range tracking camera, shuttle Atlantis. It was a crystal clear day, and you can clearly see how the solid rocket booster plume changes as the vehicle is ascending higher and higher into a true vacuum.
You're scary, Chris, that you know that, but that's amazing. Thank you for your wealth of knowledge as per usual. Let's see. Here's a good one from Marcus because I always like to put my tinfoil hat on. You guys know this.
Uh-huh.
They're asking, can some of the Hush Hush satellites and/or their components be somehow identified after they're in orbit with ground level telescopes, for example? Excuse me while the FBI just bursts in like in the door. Someone needs to post that GIF somewhere.
So I would say that there are there are two legitimate answers to both the actual question and the spirit of the question. So these satellites that were on board the Atlas were not that big. So the fact that they're going to geo, I would love to see the backyard telescope that you've got that could that could discern them, just because of how small in size they are. Now, larger spy satellites are definitely visible in the geo belt with big enough telescopes, and amateur
Cough, cough,
astronomers.
Orion.
Yeah, exactly. You knew where I was going with this. Amateur astronomers have actually found them in orbit after their launches and discerned their shape, discerned their sizes, and from that, we're kind of able to discern exactly what they do up there and specifically what they're looking at, all thanks to telescopes. So when they're big enough, you can, but these likely not because of how small they were.
And
Yeah,
also, we do know that there were only 2 spacecraft on board. A lot of what's hush-hush are the instruments that were on board, those specific hosted by those spacecraft, which you're not going to get that much detail from a telescope image, even if it was like low Earth orbit. So, yeah.
all right. Tinfoil hats off, everybody. Good
For
question, though,
now, for
Marcus.
now.
For now. Let's see. What else do we have? Really quick, a couple super chats. Remy Turk, that's another name that pops up a lot. Thank you so much for the support. They say cheers from the Netherlands. Hub Holland. Mars Labs, thank you for the support. They say, I saw a wise man in the middle of this chat. Cool look, Jack Beyer. Thank you. We're all rocking the beard today, and to that end, we've got a couple not questions, but let's see. Wolfgang, I'm just gonna run through them really quick because we're in between segments officially, and I'm going to just do this. Deal with it. Wolfgang Mozart says Thomas looks cool with that beard. Ron Gum says, are we going full beard stream? Yes. The answer is obviously yes. Let's see. And Anthony says Thomas Beard Club.
Oh gosh.
And yeah, with that, I think that's enough beard chat. But I just wanted to throw those in there really quick. Do we have anything else on STP3? I'm looking for some more questions real quick.
That was the first of a string of really cool launches this week, and we've got other ones to talk about as well.
All
Yeah.
right. Let's move on then. Next up, we have a little person named Yusaku Meizawa launching to the ISS aboard a Soyuz. Yusaku Meizawa of Dear Moon fame. That's why I don't say little. I say little person jokingly because he's a billionaire. He's a Japanese billionaire who's going to space now and has a trip
Twice.
on yeah, and is booking a trip on Starship, of course, and investing in Starship. So very cool to see this happen, and a return for Russia's space tourism program, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and a straight up tourism flight too, which we have seen in the past, but years and years and years and years ago, back when back when shuttles still did some of the crew rotation flights up to the station, and the Soyuzes were just the lifeboats, so they would launch with crews and then the crew would just transfer Soyuzes, and that's how they used to do it before the Soyuzes did it all. So we really haven't had the opportunity to see Roscosmos do these tourism flights aside from rando flights where like, oh, there was just one American and one Russian, so there was an empty seat left. So, a space tourist filled it because we didn't need that seat for a crew flight. Or sort of like we saw in October, where the commander of Soyuz MS-19 went up to join the space station crew and brought the 2 filmmakers along with him, but then the filmmakers went back with somebody else who had been up on the station. So it was sort of a half tourist, half crew rotation flight, but this is pure tourism. All 3 of them come back in a few days from now, actually.
Man, I'm just excited to see more space tourism happen, and of course, we all want to see Meizawa's Dear Moon flight. That's the big headline, right? But this is sort of a prelude to that.
Is Meizawa the first private astronaut who already has 2 flights on the books? Obviously, he's only flown one of them and is flying the first one right now. But has there been other space tourists that have flown multiple times already? Either suborbitally or orbitally?
Well,
That's a good
the
question.
good,
Not
the good,
counting Spaceship Two pilots, which I wouldn't call them tourists.
right. Well, I was gonna say the good news is all of those were this year. Just to some degree. No,
I don't think there were.
yeah,
I don't think any of the early Soyuz tourists have flown multiple times.
no,
What is
no.
his second flight booked? Is it another Soyuz flight?
Well,
Oh
Dear
no,
Moon.
Dear Moon is what
Oh,
we're
that's
talking
the
about.
two.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
bonk. Yeah, very cool. Oh my gosh, Dear Moon. But as a prelude to that, this is very exciting. I mean, how cool. We've got a couple questions if you guys want to jump into that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Let's see. Ren Bird is asking, does Meizawa's flight have any tie-ins to Jaxa? They're doing some experiments for Jaxa, right? Or something along those lines?
Yeah, yeah. So like with the I don't know why I got nervous and tongue twisted there, but we're gonna try that all over again. Sort of like the Inspiration 4 mission earlier this year was both, orbital tourism, but they also, didn't just fundraise for St. Jude. They also performed science experiments, some of them directly aimed at supporting St. Jude research, but also aimed at supporting the ability for regular, ordinary people to continue to fly in space. So, in that regard, yes, there was some interplay between Jaxa and Meizawa in this regard for a few of the experiments that were going up. One of the things, remember, Soyuz is very, very cramped.
Hmm.
And there's not a lot of room to take some stuff up. So, some stuff was already pre positioned. From progress flights for him in that regard, but yeah, a few things.
I mean, Soyuz famously so cramped that you need a pokey stick to reach some of the controls,
Yes.
which is I just love it. I love the pokey stick so much. It might be my favorite part of Soyuz, aside from its reliability. Um, let's see.
Because
Here's
it's
one.
simple and it works, so why change it? I love it.
Yeah, I would argue the pokey stick is part of Soyuz's reliability. It works,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
I mean, no disagreements there. If keep it simple, stupid. Sometimes all you need is a pokey stick.
Also, I do want to shout out Roscosmos here because they have upped the game in their launch coverage and the
Yeah, it's
camera
true.
upgrades, not just on the ground where they have the drone shots now of all the launches,
Hmm.
which is really cool, but the onboard cameras for the Soyuz are just perfection, especially during hot staging. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's you always gotta love to see when coverage like that improves because of course it's something we care about and it's something that'll get the public excited about space travel. So
Hmm.
it's always what you want to see is very good camera views from orbit. We have a bit of follow up. People are saying here, Mr. Huggy here is saying multiple people in chat are saying, oh, it just moved on me. Where did it go? Charles Simonal has been to the ISS twice
Oh.
as a tourist. So
Oh,
thank
okay.
you for that,
Eh,
Mr. Huggy. I did that. Yeah, I did not know that. Um,
Oh.
and then Amiga Clone is asking, has there ever been more than 2 Japanese people in orbit at the same time?
Yes, there have. It's happened a couple of times. Suichi Noguchi and Aki Hoshide handed off to each other between the Crew 1 and Crew 2 flights earlier this year, as a matter of fact. And there was a shuttle mission in 2010 where Soichi Noguchi was on board the station when Naoka Yamazaki launched on one of the final shuttle missions and joined him in orbit. And I believe that was the first time that 2 Japanese citizens were in orbit at the same time.
Very cool. Here's one, which, I mean, it makes sense to ask this question. Why didn't he go on a Crew Dragon since he's flying with SpaceX for the Dear Moon mission?
A good question. Either the seat was cheaper on Soyuz, or far more likely this was sort of the slot that Roscosmos already had planned for something, and it just worked. So it was just easier and quicker to go on the Soyuz than it was to wait for a Dragon, because we don't currently have any non-science related Dragon missions that are slated to go to the space station, right? The Axiom flights coming up are very heavily science oriented as well. So we don't really have tourist flights yet on the US side bound for the station. We do know there's that like one with Tom Cruise that's out there where he's like supposedly going to film a movie, but
But
we
that's
kind of
that's
heard
Axiom 2, isn't it?
well, we kind of know because that's the Pei-Witsin flight. Another science one. That's sort of one that came up. It's going to be with Axiom, but now we have heard absolutely nothing about it for
Hmm.
a year or two, and not really sure what's going to come of that, except that it's still possible or in the works, but not really sure about that one. So yeah, it's just possible that on the US side we're just not ready for that yet.
Yeah, I mean, with the exception of I-4, which I feel like happened and came together really quickly, at least from what we saw as a public.
Hmm.
These things are usually planned out pretty far in advance. So it could have just been that Yusaku booked this flight before he would have been able to book a Crew Dragon flight. Um,
Sure.
But that makes sense what you're saying about the ISS, Chris. Good question from chat there. Here's another one. Uh, sort of related, tangentially related. Does NASA have to certify Starship for people for a tourist flight, like a non-NASA flight? That would be an FAA thing, right?
Right.
Correct.
The only regulatory body that applies to the space tourism flights that do not involve the ISS in any way is the FAA. NASA's certification only becomes involved if there are NASA astronauts on board or if it is going to the International Space Station. Yeah.
That makes sense.
And that goes with the suborbital vehicles
That's
too.
exactly what I was about to say. You don't see NASA.
Spaceship 2, New Shepard. If NASA ever wants to put researchers on either of those vehicles, NASA certification comes into play there. NASA has already flown uncrewed payloads on those rockets, so NASA has, in some ways, certified those vehicles, but not human-rated them. But of course, given that both of those vehicles have flown people already, the path towards NASA flying an astronaut on one or both of them is probably shorter than certifying like an orbital system that hasn't flown humans at all before. But there would still be some extra steps there if that was going to happen.
Very cool. Really quickly, we got a couple super chats coming in. CA and P Railroad, thank you for the support. They say just dropping in to say hey to the crew with the thermo insulation on the face. And Moldy Space Industries, you can guess it. Thank you for the support. They're saying Thomas Beard Fan Club. Love it. Let's see, some more questions coming through. Tony Jebson is asking, will there be a new IDSS adapter added to Pritchell to allow more Crew Dragon flights?
Yeah, so this was sort of a fascinating thing that just sort of emerged when Pritchell was launched. Because it's got the adapter for the Soyuz and the Progress vehicles, and mainly that's its role. It's a docking hub, but it was part of the original modular design of the ISS when Russia was going to have a lot more modules than they ended up having. So it was kind of this weird module without a purpose because the other nodes that are connected to it can't allow Soyuz and Progress to dock. They're not compatible in the sort of drogue and probe system that Soyuz uses. So all of a sudden there came this idea, well, Dragons or Starliners can dock to them, but it would need an international docking adapter, which is very different from the probe and drogue system that the Soyuz uses again. So and all of that. Could they stick an IDA on it? Yeah, they probably could figure out a way to do that fairly easily. Will they? I don't know, because the Axiom module additions to the US side of the station will also provide additional docking ports for the US side crew vehicles as well. So I don't really know what's going to come of that idea. Could it happen? Yeah, with modification. Would it probably become something that we'd actually look at if, say, Russia left the ISS program, as they have said they want to do, and therefore now all of those are ours, so to speak. So let's utilize them the way they can. Probably, if Russia stays, they're still needed for Progress and Soyuz, so I don't think they go anywhere. Yeah.
Very cool. I'm going to see if we got a couple more questions, maybe one or two, and we can move on to the next topic of discussion. King Zoo again was asking, do you think we'll ever see a Soyuz and a Dragon dock in Leo? That's like the Apollo Soyuz kind of thing all over
wow.
again. How cool would that be?
It would be really cool. I think realistically, no, because there's no reason to do it.
Yeah, it would have to be like the relations between us and Russia got really bad, and then we tried to patch them up again. It was like a whole detente kind of thing, something like that. But hopefully, we don't even get to that point.
We could. What if there was a Starship and whatever Russia's like Orion knockoff is called, Federation or something? That docked in like lunar orbit or something. That would be cool.
That would be
or like
cool.
Orion and
the Orel vehicle.
Yes, Orel. Thank
Yeah.
you. I know it translated
It translates
to Federation.
To Federation.
But, yeah.
I know you said that, and I immediately started going, "What's the name? What's the name? What's the name?"
Yeah, hopefully we never get to the point where that's necessary as a diplomacy thing, because I think we can all safely say, please no Cold War II Electric Boogaloo.
Seriously.
Let's see. Okay, I think we're about good to move on to the next topic here, which is drum roll. But that's my excellent drum roll. Rocket Lab, a date with destiny. Rocket Lab launched a thing into space,
No,
didn't
no,
they,
no. A
guys?
data with destiny.
Oh
You
my
got to get
God,
the pun right.
I can't read. I can't read today.
You've
A
got to
data.
you've got to picture Commander Data in that Western episode of Next Generation. You
Perfect.
know.
I love that one. He's like, he finds Guinan and is like, and she's like, who are you?
Yes.
So who wants to take it? Rocket Lab. Here we go. I mean, you can see the string. Oh my gosh, New Zealand. What a launch site.
Yeah. Yeah, so this was actually the second launch in just under 3 weeks from the Mahia Peninsula down in New Zealand, which is a like a new record for Rocket Lab. Rocket Lab has been saying for a long time that they want to, up their launch cadence, and for a while they've been kind of at the point where they were ready to do that. But over this past year plus, they've had troubles with the ongoing pandemic in New Zealand with lockdowns. Prohibiting them from conducting their launch operations and things like that. And so that's been the main holdback. And since that is starting to improve once again, they were managed to get these pair of launches off in relatively quick succession. They're kind of aiming for somewhere on the order of 2 launches a month into next year, which would again be a step towards even faster launch cadence, and that will also get aided by hopefully the addition of 2 more launch pads. One more in Mahia. They have Launch Complex 1B that has yet to be used, and then hopefully Launch Complex 2 at the Wallops flight facility pending the certification of their flight termination system by NASA. So both of those additions should help out. We have seen pictures of their factory with tons of rockets just kind of sitting there, so we know the manufacturing can support it, and we know that reusability is only going to help that as they get farther along in that program. So that's another aspect, but just another. Both of these launches were pairs of Black Sky satellites, so 4 Black Sky satellites from Rocket Lab, plus 2 that were on the Starlink rideshare just before that. So Black Sky had a pretty good couple weeks with a bunch of new satellites on orbit now, and Rocket Lab getting these 2 flights to wrap up their 2021 campaign and looking ahead to more launches next year. And yeah, we're also just a quick shout out. We're talking about improving launch coverage. Rocket Lab over the last few launches have had kept their webcast live all the way through payload deployment. We don't get onboard camera views of that, but instead of ending the coverage after kick stage step and then just waiting for like a tweet, they actually stay live and give us live updates until the mission is actually complete. So I think that's been pretty cool to follow along with as well.
Yeah, I'm
Indeed,
just
and thank you to Rocket Lab for that transparency as well. That's been a wonderfully added bonus to the coverage of late. And can I just say too, every time I see a launch from either Mahia or Tanegashima, I
Hmm.
just have to pause and go, I don't know which one wins for most beautiful launch site, but
oh Chris,
man,
it's Vandenberg.
how can you see it through the
Yeah,
fog?
you can't see it, Jack. Come on.
I walked right into that one. I walked right into that one. No, that's fair.
The 2 people living near Cape Canaveral said, "No, no, we will not take your Vandy stuff here. No Vandy propaganda here."
Vandaganda. It's you're not wrong though. Mahia and I'm not going to say the one in Japan are both very beautiful launch sites. I'm just going to not even butcher the pronunciation there. Uh, let's see. Here's a question from Matt. Will Rocket Lab launch Neutron from New Zealand or just Wallops?
Well, I don't actually know how to answer that question because Wallops is no longer guaranteed. When they initially
Right.
announced Neutron in March of this year, Wallops was specifically mentioned. I mean, specifically Pad
0A.
0A,
Yeah.
the same one that Antares launches from because it had a lot of the infrastructure, right, sized correctly for a medium class launch vehicle like the Neutron was supposed to be, using RP1 kerosene and liquid oxygen for its stages. All that seemed great because the Electron pad's going to be, literally right next door to it. And then almost everything we knew about Neutron was gone because
Yeah.
it wasn't going to be reusable. It was going to launch from Wallops. It was going to use a certain amount of propellant. And then when it was revealed a little bit ago, it was now almost completely reusable except for the second stage, even the payload fairings, and it now uses methane and oxygen. But the key point to where it's going to launch from, they very specifically and notably did not mention a launch site anymore
Hmm.
in the presentation. They also did not mention a launch date, and that is, I'm going to paraphrase this because according to Peter Beck, there's a lot of obfuscation that goes on in the industry about
Hmm.
launch dates and locations and times and things like that. So they didn't want to say something until they're farther along in the development process. But not mentioning Wallops specifically comes to the point where they did talk about the launch pad, and it's incredibly clean. I mean,
Yeah.
they talked about a very, very clean location, which to me indicates they're more going for mobility than anything else with this design and how this might work. In terms of being, in terms of either being able to transfer your launch stuff to different locations or being able to come into an existing location and very, very quickly and simply have a facility that you can launch these rockets from. So, I mean, Wallops would still be a good idea if you're looking for no one else uses that range, so we can pretty much have any date that we want. But Wallops would also put you at a kind of weird disadvantage because you're oddly like halfway between the equator and the poles, so you're not really optimized for any trajectory out of there. I don't know. Those are my thoughts. Thomas, take it away.
I find it interesting how you interpreted the clean launchpad development because I interpreted it very differently. You said
Hmm.
they might be aiming towards a very transportable and mobile launch system. I was more thinking like clearly they would be looking at a clean slate rather than using a pad with an existing infrastructure such as Pad OA.
Mhm, mhm,
But I Rocket Lab in the past, when talking about even Electron, Peter Beck has said that they've aimed to take a lot of the complexity of that you need in an orbital launch system and move it away from the rocket and put it all on the ground side. So you're not flying all the complicated stuff. And to me, obviously, you do want to keep your ground systems, clean and not as little complexity as you can do. I rather see that as we're going to build a clean slate launch site with the simplified and dedicated to Neutron launch equipment, but have a fixed structure that takes, instead of putting a bunch of complexity into the launch vehicle, having all of as much infrastructure as you can around that launch site so that the
mhm.
vehicle can be simpler and lighter and higher performance, and also tailored towards reusability and things like that.
Yeah, and I think there's an interesting parallel with this too, because the way they sort of redesigned Neutron, it it if I'm understanding it correctly, it has to be vertical when you integrate the second stage because of the way the
Yes, it
second
does.
stage hangs like that. So, how is that going to work in terms of payload encapsulation and all those clean room sort of environment things? Very similar questions to another larger version of a fully reusable
Mm-hmm.
system that we've been asking a very similar question of how are they going to get the payload into that thing
Yep.
vertically if it needs clean room capability? So very similarly fascinating questions because yeah, like how do you do that with Neutron?
Let's see some questions. Samuel, well, here's more of a statement. Samuel Flint is saying Kodiak is also beautiful. Correct. Kodiak is also a
That's
beautiful launch
true.
site.
Yes.
I'm glad though that we could all agree that Vandenberg is best. All right, moving on. Uh, Tony Jepson is saying, I know they didn't catch it, but did they recover the booster?
No, there was no recovery hardware at all, no parachute or anything. The most recent flight, but prior to this one, was a full parachute and even had the helicopter in the area to start getting towards ready for a catch attempt. But there's no recovery experimentation on this particular flight. Their next recovery experiment, though, will be next year in the first quarter of 2022 and will include the first catch attempt. So that is what's coming up next, but nothing on this particular flight.
So weird that the words catch attempt are not even specific to one launch provider at this point.
Oh, that's
No.
true.
It hurts my head.
First
Uh,
helicopter catch attempt.
there we go. Thank you. Well, I mean, now we're gonna get questions in chat like, are they gonna try and catch Starship with a helicopter? Can't they just build a
Oh
really, really,
God.
really, really big
That'd be a
helicopter?
really big helicopter.
Let's see. Elizabeth Chase, thank you for the support. They say, hi guys, just wanted to say me and my hubby love your updates. And Rough Rider Show, what's up, Rough Rider Show? They are making a kayak reference. Send Jack on a kayak to the Rocket Lab catch, showing my support for this team. Thanks, buddy. We appreciate the support. That would have to be like a seafaring kayak. I don't know if
It'd
those.
be and a very long trip.
Yeah,
With
I don't
days
know.
of provisions, my goodness.
I don't know if my arms can handle that. Let's see here. Matthias is asking, what happened to Launchpad 1B in Mahia?
Yeah, it's there. It's just waiting for its first launch. I don't know if there's actually work remaining. I'm pretty sure that the pad is very close to, if not ready to support its first launch. Just a matter of them getting the launch cadence up to a point where they're ready to use it. And if I had to bet, we'll see a debut next year as long as that launch cadence uptick continues.
Along with LC2
Yes.
at Wallops for some US-based DoD and NASA missions as well. Although the first NASA mission is launching from Mahia.
Yes.
And then, yeah, well, of course, we're getting chat comments about catching Saturn V first stages with a helicopter. 'Cause it's a NASA concept. All kinds of fun stuff.
To be clear, not the first NASA mission Rocket Lab has launched, the first of the coming.
Yes.
Yes, just to clarify that.
Also, Rocket Lab has launched DoD stuff from New Zealand.
Right.
It's not like they can't do that, but yeah.
Here's a cool question. We can all put our tinfoil hats back on briefly. They say, Shiva Ho is asking, could they use the Black Sky Sats to image other spy satellites in space? Satellite on satellite imagery is something that has always fascinated me. I forget what book I was reading that really went into it. I think it might have been Into the Black. I'm not recalling off the top of my head, but
so from my not extensive but not that limited experience in spacecraft design,
okay.
Spacecraft optics are usually tailored towards what you're going to be imaging. So if you take a satellite that is intended to image something at the distance of Earth's surface, it would be very difficult to then just point that 90 degrees to the right and look at something else in the relatively same orbit as you. You would have a very hard time like focusing the lens, for example. But it's not like you couldn't take the Black Sky satellite bus and adapt it, because if you just adjusted your lens measurements on the ground, the bus is probably pretty useful. Take a look at the Hubble Space Telescope, which is more or less a spy satellite that we aimed at out from Earth instead of at Earth. That is not unheard of, but taking a satellite that's like already in orbit and then retasking it that way is not that simple.
And it has been done before. Like we have been able to image craft in orbit, and the government does do this. There was a Russian classified satellite that intercepted a classified U.S. satellite in orbit, and like station kept with it and was flying around it, and we're pretty certain it was taking photographs and trying to figure out what it was and spying on it. But in terms of like useful information, it would kind of depend on what granularity you're trying to get. Specifically, I'm thinking, but like there were instances where they tried to photograph human vehicles in orbit to ascertain status of heat shields and things like that, and the best they could come up with was inconclusive, probably fine.
I mean, there's even a story with Columbia where they were wanting to image it with a satellite, with a DoD asset in orbit, and then declined to do so. But I know I've read about it happening. I wish I could remember the book that I read it in off the top of my head. But it's a thing that happens for sure. But like you said, Thomas, the focal lengths and everything, you kind of want the spacecraft to be tailored for that sort of thing, although it doesn't necessarily have to be.
Right.
All right, tinfoil hats off.
Tinfoil hat off.
We actually need tinfoil hats that we can do.
Next episode, we'll have tinfoil hats.
We really missed out on Halloween. I mean, come on. Let's see.
Oh my gosh, if I would have showed up to the Crew 3 launch in a tinfoil hat, that would have been amazing.
Would have been great. Just like bring like a protest sign that says like space isn't real or something.
Oh, you're one of those people who believe in space.
Yeah. Wake up, sheeple. All right, let's see. I can find some more questions, or I think that's about it for Rocket Lab. Maybe let's move on to the next thing.
Because we finally have an answer to a question that we and so many others have been asking for years.
All right.
When will they convert the Falcon Heavy side boosters into Falcon 9 rockets? And we have an answer because it's happened, right, Thomas?
You're right. So this is finally, this was leading up to the launch of IXPE, which we'll talk about next. But leading up to that launch, of course, members of the media were out at Kennedy Space Center to take a look at remote cameras and things like that. And while sitting at the press site, this rolls past NSF photographer Stephen Marr and taking a quicker look. It's obviously a Falcon 9. It's obviously a flown Falcon 9. It's got landing legs on it. No grid fins, though. That'll be a point of consideration in a second. But it's got a brand new upper stage on it, so clearly getting ready to flight, and it was rolling out towards the launch pads. To be clear, even though it's rolling directly towards 39A, that is also a route to get to pad 40, so it could have been going to either launch pad. But upon closer inspection, the serial number, which is visible up near the interstage, was 52, which we know is a Falcon Heavy side booster, which supported the Arabsat and SDP-2 missions. And that indicates that for the first time, SpaceX has taken a Falcon Heavy side booster and is going to be using it as its own standalone Falcon 9, something that SpaceX has said they were able to do and just have not done in a while. This booster has not flown since SDP-2, which was in 2019, but it looks like they are ready to add it to the Falcon 9 fleet. It's got the landing legs on it. You can see there's no grid fins installed, likely because they didn't store this thing with the grid fins just sitting there and not using them. They likely took the grid fins off and used them on other boosters that were flying. So it just needs to get its grid fins back, basically. But it's got the landing legs on it. It will probably get grid fins so that it can be recovered after its next mission. We are guessing it is Turksat 5B, which is the next Falcon 9 mission out of Florida. It could, in theory, be CRS-24 if they wanted to assign it there too. There are other boosters available for either of those missions, but the best guess is Turksat. We'll have to see which mission this one actually gets assigned to. But regardless, a new booster that is back active within the fleet, and cool to see that they can in fact do that, basically replacing the nose cone with an interstage, and now it's a Falcon 9.
And I was kind of thinking about this, and why now? Why convert one? And if one's been converted, you can probably make the assumption that we'll see the other one at some point too,
Maybe.
that's been converted, here. But the question is sort of why now? Like last year when they lost two boosters in landing attempt
Mhm.
failures, sort of back in almost back-to-back months. Like there was a lot of speculation because the fleet had been dwindled by that they would take them and convert them at that point, but they never materialized.
Right.
And then shortly thereafter, and then this year we had the very rapid flight rate at the beginning of the year. Do we think this is either, hey, because some of our boosters are aging into that point where they're going to be pulled from service for more detailed inspections, maybe these are coming online to take their places? Or is it potentially an indication that it wasn't as simple as popping the nose cone off and putting on an interstage as Elon had said it was?
It is worth thinking about that. Like Thomas said, the booster had been sitting since
Mhm.
2019. I think summer of 2019, right, was when
Yeah.
STP-2
Yep.
happened. So that is a long time, and surely it didn't take them 2 years
Right.
to mod the side booster into there's just no world in which it would take that long. However, maybe it's the case that while sitting around waiting for another Falcon Heavy mission, they have changed the center core in some minor ways or improved the center core in some ways that this is no longer functional as a side core. This is just me speculating rampantly, but uh, 2 years is a long time. We know that that SpaceX iterates Falcon 9 over time, even
Sure.
within individual blocks. Like I've heard it said multiple times that no two Falcon 9s are exactly alike, even if they're both Block 5 Falcons.
Right.
So it could be something along those lines where they had this booster sitting around and they thought, well, it's no longer compatible with how the center core is in theory, in my wacky theory, and decided to swap it into, finally implement their plan to be able to do this. That's just me throwing something out there as we try and sort of figure out the motivation behind this. Because, like
I
you said,
don't.
Chris, why now?
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad theory. I also am very interested why it took so long because it seemed like they had a really prime opportunity to do this last year. However, I will also point out, Chris mentioning that it is maybe a fair assumption that the other one will also get converted. I would offer a possible counter theory, and I'm not, arguing for one or the other, but just another idea is that the next Falcon Heavy that will need flight-proven hardware is a while away. The next mission is USSF-44, which requires 3 brand new boosters. We know that there are 3 new Falcon Heavy stages in various stages of readiness. In fact, all 3 stages for SF-44 are actually already at the Kennedy Space Center. So that hardware is already ready to go.
They're
And
in the
once those,
HIF.
right, and then once those side boosters will be recovered, so they will have those available for Falcon Heavy missions. So they don't need Falcon Heavy side boosters sitting around. However, even if there's no change that says actually we can't use this as a Falcon Heavy, we will only use it as Falcon 9, there's also nothing to say that they can't convert it back after a while. They might just say, listen, we want one extra Falcon 9 for a little bit, so we're going to fly this side booster as a Falcon 9 for maybe a mission or two. And then, okay, we're ready to ramp up Falcon Heavy launch cadence. We'd actually like 2 sets of side boosters. So this one that just flew a couple Falcon 9 missions, let's convert it back. Let's take the interstage off, put the nose cone back on. That could be a thing. And thus, if they only wanted one extra Falcon 9, that other side booster might just sit around and wait to rejoin this one for Falcon Heavy missions. That's another theory that I could just think of. But SpaceX hasn't said anything about this, so this is all under the rampant speculation banner that we still need to get in our graphics package.
Right.
Yeah, sure enough. I mean, that seems plausible to me. Although I'd be sad for the other side booster to just have to sort of
Just
sit
like
around.
sitting around.
It's like I'm bored. You're not.
Maybe they'll
you
bring it out of the hangar and let it watch its friend
There
do
you
a
go.
flight and
Yeah.
see it come back.
I mean, I like that better than having it just sit there. Rockets need to be providing up mass into orbit, not just sitting around. Do you think this is a me question now? Under your previous theory, do you think that they would fly a Falcon Heavy with a side core that's flown once and a side core that has flown like 3 times, after having been converted to a Falcon 9 and then converted back? Is that something you think they would do?
I think so.
Merlins are
Falcon,
Merlins. Yeah.
right? And Falcon Heavy demo, the center core was brand new, but the side boosters had already flown before. And so they've mixed and matched flight histories before.
All right,
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah, it's not like solid rocket motors where you have to take where like the ones that have the same propellant cast, like this batch of
Right.
propellant have to be matched together
That's true.
for evening of the thrust on both sides. So yeah, I wouldn't see an issue why a once flown side core couldn't go with a thrice flown
Neat.
side core.
Also, STB2 had proven side boosters, but a brand new center core. So another
Right.
example, even.
Brandon Lair is asking, was a Falcon Heavy core ever recovered? That's a no, right? They still have not recovered a Falcon
Oh,
Heavy.
me and Chris had this argument about this when it happened, and I don't think we even settled. Chris, I'll let you answer first.
It depends on what you mean by recovered.
Yep.
2 did not land, so no, I would definitely say that 2 were not recovered.
Yep.
However, 1 did land, was stable for a while, and then tipped over in rough seas before they could get to it to firmly secure it to the deck, and that's the one that sort of came back and like half of it was missing.
Right.
What do you consider a recovery? Do they have to recover it and be able to reuse it? I mean, I don't actually think SpaceX considers it a successful recovery, but it depends on at what point do you consider it recovered. And I would say that if SpaceX's internal nomenclature is to level them up upon landing, then if they tip over before you can secure it, you did recover it, just not successfully. I don't know how you do that, but anyway, that's our
Yeah.
argument, Thomas.
Yeah, it's just so the way that I differentiate it, and I completely understand Chris's POV on this. I differentiated landing versus recovered. They landed one center core. That I think we all agree on. The Arabsat 6A core landed successfully on the drone ship, which Michael is showing us a replay of. However, to me, recovery means bringing it back to port successfully and offload it, in which case and under that definition, they did not, because while out at sea, rough seas caused it to tip, and that center core came back, like you said, with about half of it missing, which I think we can all agree is not that successful. So yeah, it depends on where you draw the line of what is recovery. But I think we have answered your question depending on however you define it.
I love it. I had no idea. I was just opening up a can of worms, and I'm like, now I'm like looking for more cans of worms. I'm like, what do we got? Oh man, let's see. What else do we have?
We are all also very excitedly waiting for the first center core to be fully successfully recovered and ready to be reused,
Yeah.
which will not happen on SF-44 because they're not even going to try to get the thing back. But hopefully the one after that.
Let's see. Good question from Brandon. Let's see. Looking for some more questions before we decide to move on. Dean Harbold, thank you for the support. They say, I personally feel like they are phasing out Falcon Heavy in anticipation of using Starship. I don't agree. They're still
I
selling.
also do not agree.
They're still selling Falcon Heavy missions. They just sold a couple. Was it this year or was it last year?
Yeah.
I think we've gotten a couple
Several.
announcements in recent memory. Yeah, where they've
Mhm.
they've sold more Falcon Heavy flights, which is awesome. And as much as we all love Starship and Super Heavy, there's still prototypes and there's still a test program and they still have ways to go. As much as I hate to say it, it's just the reality. They still have a ways to go before they're carrying customer payloads.
Yeah,
There
I
are
mean, the
as
most
many
recent.
as. Yep, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No, go. Yeah, no. How many are there? Yeah, on the
There are as
manifest.
many as 6 Falcon Heavy missions next year alone.
Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
there are up to 3 different missions for the U.S. Space Force SF-44, 52, and 67. There's also the Psyche mission for NASA out to the asteroid belt, as well as up to 2 communication satellites, one for Viasat and one for Inmarsat. And then beyond that, there is a mission to the moon under the CLPS program. There is the GOES-U weather satellite for NOAA, which will be utilizing Falcon Heavy. The Europa Clipper mission for NASA. I'm totally reading off of Wikipedia, by the way. The initial launch for the NASA Lunar Gateway is on a Falcon Heavy mission. The Gateway will also be supported by the Gateway XL spacecraft, or sorry, the Dragon XL.
You got it.
Dragon XL spacecraft, which will resupply Gateway, and that was launched on Falcon Heavy. So that manifest has grown recently. The list is long. That's also only the publicly known manifest, which you can never assume that that's the complete manifest. But Falcon Heavy has an extensive list of payloads coming up, and just because it has not flown recently, so I get the impression that they haven't flown it recently. The fact is that they were supposed to fly it this year, and those Space Force payloads have had delays. Next year, you will hopefully see a big uptick in Falcon Heavy cadence, and the rocket will be back with a vengeance.
Yeah, and I mean, surely some of those 6 launches for Heavy next year will slip. Although maybe
Of course,
not.
yeah.
You never
Very
know.
unlikely that all 6 fly next year. That's why emphasis on the up to.
But it's worth mentioning that Delta 4 Heavy, in almost 20 years of existence of flying. I think the first flight was in 2004 ish.
Something like that. Yeah.
Delta 4 Heavy has flown like 13 times. Like, so in a decade, that's less than one launch a year. So if you want to think about phasing something, or it's close to less than, whatever. Math bad. I'm bad at math. Point being, there's a lot of launches for Falcon Heavy coming up when you consider how many times Delta Heavy has launched. If I can get that point out, I can survive and move on to the next thing. Here we go. I'm good at talking. Okay, let's see. I think that is it for questions on that. I mean, it was really a side booster was spotted, converted, and we got into the weeds on Falcon Heavy because who doesn't love Falcon Heavy?
Well,
But
which, to be fair, is exactly what we did when we saw it.
yeah, I believe it. And once again, we've already shouted out Steven on this stream for fantastic photos, but way to go to him for getting a shot high enough resolution and sharp enough focus to be able to discern what booster that was. But like we said when we started this discussion about the conversion of 1052, that was ahead of the IXPE launch, right?
Yes, it was.
IXPE. I'm just gonna say IXPE.
Go for it, because it's correct. IXPE, NASA loves an acronym because nothing confuses your relatives slightly less than saying IXPE, and then they go, what's that? And you go, the Imaging X-ray Polarimetry Explorer, and they're like, I'm more confused. So IXPE. IXPE. But yeah, so this is IXPE lifting off. Thomas, you had a great track on this one.
Thank
Falcon 9
you.
ascended early Thursday morning. carrying IXPE, which is a revolutionary X-ray telescope. So basically, there are certain parameters in X-ray astronomy that you're looking at, right? And time, position, and energy are all things that when we look at objects like neutron stars and black holes and magnetars with the Chandra Space Telescope, which was launched back in 1997, or sorry, 1999, we can get those three things. And we can learn a lot from those three things. But there are two other things: the polarization of the light of the X-rays themselves, and the direction of polarization of these particles. And those two added things are things that Chandra can't do because the technology literally has not existed to do this until now. And IXPE is a small explorer that is demonstrating a lot of these polarimetry uses in space for this type of astronomy, hopefully the precursor for new X-ray astronomies or new X-ray observatories that will follow. Um, the launch was successful. It was a comically light payload for the Falcon 9. And Thomas, I'm going to tee you up here, so get ready. Because the Falcon 9s, right, are routinely throw 4.5 to 6 metric ton payloads into geostationary transfer orbit. This payload weighed 325 kilograms, literally 1/3 of a metric ton, actually less than 1/3 of a metric ton. So it, in fact, in its fully deployed configuration with it when it stands 5.1 meters tall, when the boom is extended, could have fit very nicely inside the Falcon 9 payload fairing, even with the solar arrays opened and everything. But it was still all buttoned up for liftoff. But that's because Falcon 9 had to do a very energy intense maneuver. So hashtag physics. Thomas, take it away.
Right, this is part 2 of the physics lecture for today. No, so this mission, not utilizing a return to launch site recovery despite the super light payload, and that's because of another plane change maneuver. We talked about this on STP-3 when Centaur and its payloads went all the way out to geosynchronous altitude. And in addition to circularizing the orbit, there was a plane change so that it would orbit over the equator. IXPE requires the same thing, but in low Earth orbit, which actually takes even more energy than doing it out at geosynchronous altitude. So if you look at this chart here, you can see the trajectory to the southeast from Kennedy Space Center, just like a mission to geosynchronous orbit or any orbit that needs a low inclination or is going to an eventual 0-degree inclination. You fly pretty much due east out of the Kennedy Space Center, and then once you reach that minimum inclination orbit that you can from your launch site, you eventually reach the equator. And once you're flying right about to hit the equator, you conduct what's called a plane change maneuver. You actually fire your engine perpendicular to the direction you're flying, basically, which actually slows you down a little bit eventually, and then you pick up that speed at the end of the maneuver. But this is a great animation from Flight Club to show, or I guess not animation, great graphic from Flight Club that is showing this maneuver. And you can see the stage actually turn to align itself up with a 0.2-degree inclination. So not exactly zero, but basically flying over the equator. And the reason that IXPE needs this is because of the sensitivity of its onboard instruments to the Van Allen belts. And if you were flying in any inclination that was greater than that, they would be experiencing more of the effects of that flight profile. So in order to improve the quality of the scientific readings that IXPE will gather, they went into this orbit, and Falcon 9 needs a little extra propellant in that second stage to conduct this maneuver. And so first stage had to give as much of as it could and landed on a drone ship rather than returning back to Cape Canaveral. But still, again, that is just another capability that Falcon 9 has.
Yeah, and if
I
you're
want to, and I actually was going to say, Michael, can we go back to that graphic of yes, thank you. Because there were two things there. So one, to what you were saying, Thomas, about the inclination in the Van Allen belts. And then that actually, because you wanted to get into an equatorial orbit with IXPE, that then actually allows the craft to pass over the ground communication station every single orbit at Malindi off the coast of Kenya. So every orbit, IXPE can be transmitting stuff down to the exact same ground station without having to have a network around the world because of a different inclination that you'd be in. Other thing I wanted to say with this is you can very clearly see, right, that plane maneuver was right after they came into orbital daylight, right?
Mhm.
And That is actually what dictated the 1 a.m. launch time for IXPE and its 90-minute window. It needed to be just barely past the terminator into orbital day when it popped off the top of the Falcon 9 so that it had half an orbit to deploy its solar arrays and get power positive. And build up the charges in its batteries so that it could start doing all of its more complex unfolding maneuvers during its 30-day commissioning phase. But for a lot of people who were like, well, we're just going to low Earth orbit and not rendezvousing with anything, why was it launched at 1 a.m.? Sun angles when you
Yep.
come off the top of your rocket and have to deploy your solar panels.
Next time
That
there's a
is very often what dictates launch times, rather than what
Yeah.
orbit you're going into, which can be reached at pretty much any time a lot of the time. Uh, Launching so that when spacecraft separation occurs at the beginning of orbital daylight, so you have as much time as you can to charge with solar power, is very often that launch window constraint.
Yeah, and I mean, it makes sense, and I think next time there's a jellyfish launch, I'm going to hashtag it sun angles. But if you're wondering what this extremely cool graphic and high fidelity rendering is, I mean, that shows us the sun angle of at the exact time and everything. This is Flight Club. You might have heard us talk about it before, but it's flightclub.io. It's made by friend of the channel, friend of the show, Declan, and it is a invaluable resource. Often for launches, we get asked in chat, will this be visible from X place or will this be visible from Y? I'm in Maryland. Well, am I going to be able to see this launch? Go check out flightclub.io. It is a super good resource. It's also great for planning out photographs of all those cool streak shots that you see photographers do. A lot of time they are planned on Flight Club. So just wanted to shout that out really quick. It is a super crazily good resource. I know I'm just using superlatives nonstop, but that's how I feel about it. I mean, I even showed this recently to a photographer, a friend of mine, and they were just like, what? I was like, yeah, this is how we plan out the streak shots, so we know it goes in it's the appropriate focal length, and we're in the right place, and we're pointing the right direction. And they were kind of mind blown, like, this is a thing you can do. I thought it was all just luck, and it's like, well, it used to be, now no longer. Although there's
Well,
still,
and if you've handed me the camera, it very much still is luck.
yeah. And I was gonna say, based on conditions of the day, there often is a very large element of luck involved as well. But yeah, that is flightclub.io. Just wanted to shout that out really quick.
Yeah.
Cool. So that was IXPE. Do we have anything else on IXPE? I guess I can look for some questions really quick.
Yeah, do we have any questions? Because it was not the last launch of the week either.
Yeah, we got more launches still. Jeez.
We got one more
or
launch
one more.
at least.
I guess there's one more.
I'm looking for questions. Why 0.2 degrees and not 0? Pink Mouse asks. For the inclination.
I believe so. There was a 0.2 degree inclination variance, so they could have ended up at either true equatorial or 0.4. I believe 0.2 is the optimal for the Malindi ground tracking station.
Got it. Let's see. And we already talked about this a little bit. Tony Jebson's asking, why is equatorial LEO better for IXPE? It's because of the ground station you just mentioned, right?
So the ground station yes, is part of it. The major reason is because you spend the least amount of time in the Van Allen radiation belts at the equator. And IXPE's instruments are very, very sensitive to that type of radiation. So the less time you can spend in them, the better. Which is why Chandra got thrown up way above them, but IXPE was just too small and didn't have a launch vehicle powerful enough to do that and didn't need to. So that's why it's in low Earth orbit.
Very cool. Here's a question that I don't know if it will be within our wheelhouse here. This is a very smart sounding question that I certainly don't know the answer to, but I'm going to throw it out there because I know you and you, Chris, and Thomas are both very smart individuals. So here we go. Question about IXPE and X-ray telescopes from Manuel. How much better would it be if we had true X-ray mirror materials and didn't need to rely on glancing angle optics? This is like way over my head here.
You know what? That's a fantastic question, and I'm not joking when I say I will forward that to Jonathan McDowell. Can somebody grab a screenshot of that question, please, for me? We'll get you the answer. I'm not even going to attempt to answer that because Jonathan's a much better source for that.
Yep. Well, I'll leave it to the expert.
X-ray mirror materials? That sounds really cool. I'm very curious to know the answer to this question. Sorry that we can't get it to you, but we can get it to people who can get you an answer.
Yeah, but someone grab me a screenshot of it. Yes, thank you.
Cool. Let's see.
Well, and then I kind of liked this next story. If you don't mind if I introduce this one, Jack.
No, please go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I jumped the gun, didn't I? Sorry. I saw something that I shouldn't have. Continue. Never mind.
No, we are moving on to the next story. It looks like. Oh wait, no, I'm seeing something I shouldn't have as well. Okay, I'm gonna do some super chats really quick.
Okay.
Brandon
Yeah.
Laird, thank you for the support. They say that was great. I'm with Thomas, so it's 0 recoveries. And I think talking about the Falcon Heavy discussion we were talking about earlier,
Mhm.
we're a little bit behind on the super chats, which is why I want to go through them real quick. Thank you, Brandon. Dave Wolf, thank you for the support. Nothing to say there, nothing to riff on. That's fine. Thank you for the support. It's appreciated just the same. Jay French, thank you. They say how we're going to recover and move both Falcon Heavy side cores from the drone ships as they only have one crane at the port. I think
They'll-
first one, then the other, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Just one at a time, I would think.
Yeah, it's whichever one lands first. No, I don't know.
And then John is saying Falcon second stage. Hey Astra, this is how you power slide. This, in relation to the plane change maneuver we were just talking about. Thank you for the support there, John. And CA&P Railroad, thank you for the additional support. They say, funny thing, I'm listening to y'all on my radio, and every time you said IXPE, Bixby on my phone will activate. Thanks for driving my phone crazy. Oh, I'm sorry. Hey Siri,
You're
Alexa, Bixby.
welcome.
Oh
Hey
God.
Alexa, what's XP?
Oh no.
We're-
That's terrible.
Yeah, we're awful. I'm sorry. I couldn't resist though, and I just activated my own Siri, which is just my own fault here. Cool. Let's move on to the next topic. You said you wanted to take that, Chris?
Yeah, because there was an element on this flight that really kind of spoke to me personally. I really loved the fact that Laura Shepard Churchley was on board this flight. Her father, for those who weren't following the mission, Laura Shepard Churchley's father was Alan Shepard, first American to travel into space on a 15-minute suborbital flight for NASA in May of 1961. And I think it's really poignant that 60 years after his flight, we now have her sort of replicating that in the commercial era. I thought her presence was really powerful in that regard of helping to bridge a gap between what had come, what spaceflight has been, and what the suborbital tourism market sort of is becoming at this point. So just shout out to her following in her father's footsteps. And also, she becomes the first person to ride a rocket named after one of her parents. So,
Nice, a nifty, interesting first there.
indeed, and some other cool things with this. So this was the final crewed launch of the year. It brought the total number of humans who have been launched into space in 2021 to 48. David McKay flew twice, so technically 49 human bodies crossed the Kármán line. Well, no,
Well,
49 human bodies crossed a barrier that various nations use to indicate the boundary of where space begins. One person did it twice. 27 of those went on 27 of those humans went on orbital flights, and 21 on suborbital flights. And of course, the MS-20 mission, which launched just days prior to this one, also a tourism flight, will actually be the final one to land for the year, coming up here in a few days. But I mean, a significant increase in humans who reach space this year.
You gotta love it. It's just it's what we all want to see.
Not a
Although
record, but I mean, really cool. Yeah.
I would prefer to have more of those flights be orbital, but I'm glad that the various suborbital spaceflight companies are finally getting their vehicles online and launching humans. Let's see. Do we have anything else on NS19? I'll pull out some questions if you guys have anything else you want to touch on.
I mean, a
mean,
pretty flawless flight.
yeah.
So it appeared from Blue Origin, and very successful as well. Same booster, same capsule that was used for the NS-16 and NS-18 missions earlier this year. And I do think it's worth noting from the NS-19 mission, another very nice thing that Blue Origin did. Not just the tribute on the mission patch to Glenn DeVries, but the tributes that they did for him and the messages that they read from his family. For those who were unaware or missed the news, Glenn DeVries flew on the NS-18 mission in October and was very sadly killed in a private plane accident in New Jersey a month later. So Blue Origin paying tribute to Glenn on this flight.
Yeah, that was really tragic and a nice gesture.
Some other cool things about this particular flight, it was the first one with a full crew complement, 6 people on board the capsule, which is how New Shepard is actually designed to operate. And so that's another milestone. And this is, of course, New Shepard's third crewed mission. Um, Looking forward to the cadence increasing because the more flights that we get under our belt, I think hopefully it starts to become a little bit more towards routine. Of course, we all hesitate to call spaceflight routine in most contexts, but to some extent, that is the actual eventual goal, right? And if, the more that happens, the more that people will be able to fly on these missions with lower and lower ticket prices. Um, that which is another thing, just opening that access to people experiencing spaceflight on suborbital missions, which will then translate to orbital missions, which will translate to landing on other celestial bodies. It's all interconnected, and so there are benefits coming from these missions. It was also just a very clean countdown and launch. There was not, I mean, New Shepard likes to have a couple mini holds here and there, but overall the mission was pretty smooth, and you see the flight itself was pretty much flawless. So just a good hats off to the New Shepard team who continue to operate a very reliable vehicle. And of course, there are connections to the new Glenn system, so I don't need to reiterate on the same talking points every time Blue Origin launches anything, but just some other points of discussion there.
Yes, so sort of to what you're saying, like, yeah, and hopefully the ticket prices do come down, right? Because this is, we continue to hear from people who go up both orbital, but it seems to be far more shocking on the suborbital realm because you don't have time to get used to it. But you
Mhm.
just keep hearing, the profound things that these people have to say when they come back from seeing the planet from that altitude. Um, and it's the more people we can get doing that, the definitely the better. Yeah.
I might.
Absolutely.
Should I go get my New York Giants Super Bowl champs hat because Michael Strahan was
So
on
so
screen?
so so Thomas will not be joining us for the final 2 segments of the show.
You
Listen, let's
had
go
Go
Giants. All
ahead,
right, that's the
Thomas.
end
Go
of
ahead.
my that's the end of my
I know
sports
you
talk
want to
today.
talk about this.
you had to do sports talk.
Listen, Michael Strahan flew on the flight. I'm a Giants fan. I got to listen, and everyone's gonna make fun of me now because the Giants suck this year. So they're gonna, it's not good. I shouldn't have brought it up, but
Yeah, it's also worth noting that one thing that came out right before this mission actually lifted off the ground in the hours preceding it, uh, they probably will not get astronaut wings from the FAA.
no, I
The
believe these are
FAA,
the last ones
or
that
do they
will.
still get them? Because they
I,
only listed the 16 and 18 flights that I saw, but go for it.
I'm pretty sure that
Michael
they
Michael
specified
has
that.
brought up the record on screen here.
Oh,
This is
jeez.
amazing. Thank you, Michael. You're awesome.
Oh, so bad. All right. Anyway, but no, so I believe the FAA said that this mission will be the last one under the current program that will get wings. So the 6 people on board
Okay.
NS-19 will get commercial astronaut wings, but moving forward, they are kind of changing how that system works, and which is, I think, unfortunate. I would have rather them see them like keep it consistent. But
As in not give any of the three?
no,
Or
I
not
would
give any
just
of the
keep.
four?
I would say keep giving out wings. If you go to space, you should get astronaut wings. I mean, eventually that becomes unpractical. I get that, but I don't think we're there yet. I don't know. I'd have to think about it a little bit. Going forward, there's going to be, I guess, like an online database that anyone who crosses the 80-kilometer boundary gets onto. So if you fly on Spaceship Two, you fly on New Shepard, or you go to orbit, any of those options. But I believe wings will be issued to the NS-19 crew, and beyond that, astronaut wings are more of this subjective thing that the FAA can like decide to award if you deserve it. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of the kind of hand wavy way that they're going about it going forward, but maybe it'll make sense. I'll see how they handle it for the next mission, and maybe it'll make more sense then.
I mean, I get what you're saying. They can't necessarily uh, just grant wings to everybody every time, I mean, especially as more and more and more people fly. But I don't. You're right. I don't know that we're there at the point where you do the cutoff yet. But it does kind of make sense to sort of rip the Band-Aid off now versus down the line and sort of say, well, these hundreds of people got it, but you don't. Now it's still kind of early days enough that they can say, well, it's enough that this is going to shift. I don't know. It does kind of bum me out though. Like I feel like that's a really cool part of spaceflight history. So, or spaceflight like tradition and whatnot. I don't know. It does make me kind of sad to see the ending of that Wings program.
But if the goal is to, as much as we hate the word, make it routine,
Hmm.
I don't have a pair of aviator wings because I've been a passenger on an aircraft.
Right. That's
Well, you
fair.
do. You might, but you probably got them as a kid, and they're probably a
Oh,
little
Yeah.
yeah,
little
I mean,
plastic
probably,
thing.
yeah, like,
A little
yeah,
different.
exactly.
And I
Yeah,
don't think they do that anymore.
they do, they do.
Okay.
Oh,
At
I'm
least
sure
Delta
they do.
does. Yeah.
It shows how many times I've traveled with a child, which is none. Um,
I only know that because well, I mean, to be fair, the last time I flew was before the pandemic. But yeah, there was a little kid who got wings on one of my flights in 2019. Yeah. Um,
all right. So, is there anything else for NS19, or shall we move on? I actually have a question from Sean. Was the New Shepard flight apogee affected by the extra passengers?
I do not believe so. I believe that that weight difference is somewhat negligible, and the engine can burn like an extra second if needed. Like there's a margin there. I do not believe that like they don't reach the correct apogee if there's more people on board. I don't think so.
Copy that. All right, moving on. Chris, do you want to speed run SLS?
yes, I can definitely speed run SLS and then hand off to the astronauts for you, Thomas.
Sure.
Because these are some short stories, but good stories short stories, but stories that came out this week. So SLS's rollout is now delayed until the middle of January at the earliest because of some issues that they are having with an engine controller on engine number 4 on the core stage. That story was kind of known in advance. They're troubleshooting it. They're trying to figure out if they can reset it in as it's actually in the core stage itself. There's some access issues to it, but they're basically trying to figure out a way that they can get this fixed without having to pull the engine or replace the engine. So that's sort of shifting the timelines a little bit to the right. But the other major thing that came up this week from Philip Sloss was the report that there is a ticking 20-day clock to launch that begins in the vehicle assembly building on the day that they get clearance from the range to use the range safety system on SLS. So basically, they have to install all the actual flight batteries, do the end-to-end system tests, and prove to the range that the flight termination system works in the VAB, because that's the only place they have access to that part of the rocket. But once the range says, yep, that your system is good to go, a 20-day clock starts. And for SLS, this poses a problem because it will take them 13 of those 20 to literally get to the first launch opportunity, because after they get approval from the range to use the safety system, they have to close out all of the compartments on SLS and all the cable trays that they needed access to install the batteries and do the test. They have to then completely configure the rocket for rollout, get it out to the pad, connect it to the pad, load the hydrazine and hypergolic propellants for the solid rocket motors and for the various other systems in the rocket. And basically what that means is 13 days into that 20-day clock, if everything goes perfectly, is launch attempt 1 for Artemis 1. And Artemis 1 can only do 3 attempts over 7 days because of the liquid hydrogen fuel shortage at pad 39B. So there is literally a ticking clock which will dictate whether it's 3 launch attempts over 7 days or 2 attempts over 6 days to get Artemis 1 off the ground. And if they're not off the ground when that 20-day clock expires, back to the VAB they go to do it all over again, where the 20-day clock will then reset, and it will still take them 13 days to get back into launch posture with that ticking clock. So if you thought SLS's countdown and pad ops was going to be stressful enough, oh, just wait.
That's it. It hurts me. I
Yeah.
we're running a little bit long, so I can't wax philosophic on this very long. But just suffice to say, what you just said physically hurts me.
Yeah, and this will get a little bit better for Artemis 2 and beyond because there's a second hydrogen sphere that they're building, so they'll actually have like 5 attempts over 7 days, but it still will be limited to about 7 days, even once we get to Artemis 2.
All right. Anything else on SLS? I think we're going to forego SLS questions. I'm not even seeing any, honestly, in chat.
Nothing else has really changed. NASA's still sticking to the mid-February target, although March.
That's the optimistic target. Yeah,
Yes,
right.
yeah. Most likely summer, actually, according to the Government Accountability Office. So,
Mm-hmm.
But there are new astronauts for the Artemis program as well, Thomas, are
Right.
there not?
You're right. A new astronaut class, the 2021 class, which NASA's been on this sort of path or this cadence of like every 4 years or so, a new class comes in. Although with the increase in flight opportunities through Commercial Crew and Artemis coming up, that might actually quicken. They might start bringing in classes more quickly, one after the other. But 10 new astronaut candidates now part of the astronaut corps, 4 women and 6 men. And some quick number stats: they're aged anywhere from 32 to 45 years old, so pretty wide age range. The average age was about 37 or 38. And 8 of them came from military backgrounds, so only 2 pure civilians joining the corps. And 4 of them received doctorate degrees. The other 6 had a master's degree at most. So just a pretty wide range of different experiences and things in this class, and these astronauts are going to be available to be selected for commercial crew missions to the International Space Station or riding along on Russian Soyuz vehicles, things like that, as well as missions beyond low Earth orbit with the Artemis program. And so congratulations to those 10 new astronauts. Looking forward to seeing them getting their first flight assignments after they continue their training. And very likely that a lot of these people in this photo here are going to be making their way to the lunar surface before too long.
All right. I mean,
And they will do it on
SLS.
Yeah.
Congratulations to all of the new astronauts. I mean, it's always cool to see a new class. Let's move on to Starship. Woo! Oh man, who wants to gab about Starship this week?
Well, I can just say that the reason that we haven't dedicated a whole lot of time for Starship, although of course chat always provides a good amount of Q&A, so we can do that, is the fact that not a whole lot happened this week, which is weird to say. Of course, we say that saying like we had videos of all sorts of content that if you want really detailed updates on every little thing that the teams worked on this week, little bits of construction and things. It's all on the NASASpaceflight YouTube channel, and I highly recommend checking that out. But as far as big picture testing progress and things, nothing too crazy. The biggest story has been what you're seeing now, which is Booster 5 trying to escape Boca Chica or something like that. They actually rolled it out from the high bay and moved it next to SN15 and SN16. So it's kind of sitting out there sort of on display. And not really sure what the future fate of this booster is. It could have simply been as simple as we want to use the high bay for something else right now. So Booster 5, go sit over there while we wait to see what we're going to do with you. Obviously, Booster 4 is still out at the launch site, so Booster 4 should get some sort of testing before too long. Ship 20 is out at the test site, but we're waiting on the path for future vehicles. And of course, SpaceX always bringing in upgrades and iterations as they build and test things that often means they skip vehicles. So the odds of, Booster 4 conducts an orbital flight test or conducts ground testing and then says, okay, we already have upgrades on future boosters that are like Booster 7 or 8 or something, somewhere down the line. A lot of these prototypes end up not doing a whole lot of testing because they build faster than they can test. So what Booster 5 does remains to be seen, but regardless, they did move it out. And that's kind of the biggest milestone at Boca Chica this week is that rollout. And we're all waiting to hear what the eventual fate for that will be. And we're also waiting for the next amount of testing with either Booster 4, Ship 20, test tanks that are out and about in Boca Chica, things like that.
And things should really start picking up here. I mean, not uncommon that we would sort of be slowing down toward the end of the year. I mean, even slow for SpaceX's standards.
Thank you. Yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah.
they're still cranking
Right.
out ships and
Yeah.
booster. They're still working on stuff nonstop. But for SpaceX, yeah, it seems like it's almost weird. Like we had that aborted static fire of Starship a week or two ago, and I expected them to sort of try and fire up Starship again, and they haven't even done that.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see where the test campaign goes, especially given like we saw some approvals come out today, not or this week, not the major approvals that we're waiting for. Like it's not a flight license or anything like that.
Right.
But we did see steps being taken in the correct direction for the orbital flight test sequence that we know is coming up very soon. So will definitely be fascinating to see how quickly that cadence ramps up and what is there. I mean, we know some things they still have to test, like the engines on the booster and everything like that, but definitely will be interesting to see what else is still there to do before they light this candle, as a famous person said 60 some odd years ago.
I'm real curious what they're gonna do with Booster 5. I mean, part of me is sort of wondering, hey, it's going over to the storage area where 15 and 16 are hanging out. Does that mean Booster 5 is now a gate guard, just like 15 and 16?
You know,
Or
I
or
was
like you said,
wondering.
do they just need more room in the high bay? Go ahead.
I know I was totally wondering that. Like, were they telling it the whole time it was being transported? Like, you're a wonderful booster. You're just gonna go see your friends, and then it gets there, and it's like, what do you mean this is the scrapyard holding? You know?
Where's the SPMT going? Where's the SPMT going? Come back. I mean, it does sort of seem like at times they are and this is just me, using my eyeballs and observing stuff. It seems like they build hardware almost in pairs, like 15 and 16, and 16 is sort of the backup for
Right.
15, or 8 and 9. It's almost like 9 could have been the backup for 8. If something major had happened and resulted in 8 not being able to fly. So 5 sort of seems like a backup for 4 now that it's been moved to the storage area, but yeah, it's anybody's guess as to what will happen. Maybe it's just over there waiting for Raptors, and we'll see it
Yeah.
we'll see it engined up and moved to the launch site for its own round of testing, or maybe it'll be used for structural testing only. Who knows? Someone should at Elon on Twitter and get an answer, but we certainly don't have one as to what is going to be the fate of Booster 5, which is a question from Mr. Mothy. Rip our bandages off. What's Booster 5's fate? We just don't know. Although if you told me it wasn't going to fly and it was just going to be a test article or just on display now, I would believe you.
I
I
would
know
believe
what
you
we're all
too.
hoping the fate of Booster 5 is that Booster 5, along with those 2 starships, will be the backdrop for the long overdue Elon update presentation, please.
Yes.
Come on.
Yeah, we're like years overdue at this point, and he even tweeted recently about doing another one of those updates.
Yeah, I think he even said like, yeah, I'm overdue for a presentation.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you are. Let's go. Come on.
In which he stands in front of Booster 5 in a week and goes, "It won't look like this."
And
And
we
that's
all
a
go,
joke.
of
That's a
course
joke.
not. Why
No,
would it?
we've definitely seen the design maturing a bit, so that was a joke.
And
Internet.
we know that there have been thrust pucks delivered for the booster to the launch site that are for 33 engines, and Booster 4 and
Yep.
Booster 5 are 29 engined pucks and vehicles. And I believe those 33 engine pucks that have been delivered are supportive of Raptor 2. And we've seen Raptor 2 at the test stands at McGregor, thanks to Gary's amazing photos. So all of that is to say, perhaps they are shelving Booster 5 because they're moving on to vehicles that need Raptor 2, and they're going all in on Raptor 2. That could be the case, or maybe they just don't have enough regular Raptors at this point. I mean, 29 engines is a lot of engines,
Yeah.
and we know that from Elon on Twitter and whatnot that they have been experiencing production problems with Raptor. Although I believe that was with Raptor 2, but I'm not certain.
Certainly seemed like it for Raptor 2. The production cadence he was talking about and everything.
So sure enough, Booster 5 over in what should we call it? The storage area, the hangout area,
The hangout area, I like that.
the chill zone.
Your assignment is pending area.
Oh goodness, yeah. So that was definitely the big item of the week in Starbase
Yeah.
there. Let's see. I can
Definitely.
find a couple questions real quick. I mean, a lot of these questions are ones that we can't know the answer to. How many? Acting Unit 0.8 is asking how many. Yeah, right. Is this a Futurama
Is
robot?
it a Futurama reference?
Yes, it
Please
really
let
sounds.
that be the David Duchovny reference. I hope it is.
It
from that
sounds like a Futurama reference to me. How many months until we see Catch Arms practice pick up a booster? No idea. I wish we could say a month and a half. It'll happen on
Yeah.
January 1st or something. You know, we can't.
Might legitimately not be months. They've got to get Booster 4 back onto the orbital launch mount somehow.
Well,
Yeah.
I believe the spirit of the question was picking up with the chopsticks, but yeah, I mean you can see that Booster 4 is currently hooked up to the crane there, and
Oh, oh, an unintentional thing. No, I meant, yeah, the chopsticks picking up Booster 4 to put it back onto the stand and using that as part of the practice, which might be why Booster 5 exists as an insurance policy.
Hmm.
oh, and of course it's not actually hooked up to Booster 4 right now. The crane has
Anymore.
moved.
It was not anymore.
Yeah, it
They
was. Thank
disconnected
you.
it.
I misspoke. But
There we go. So that is a live view, and all right. So they've got the crane over
Well, I
there.
take that back because that definitely looks like they're going to use the crane to put the booster on the pad. Well, never mind.
so
You
still
see how things change within the matter of seconds here at Starbase.
so still a little bit of ways to go before the chopsticks are used, but we see them working on them like constantly, and you can see the quick disconnect arm there too. All of that and the tower itself is getting a large amount of work, and you can believe that as soon as they'll be ready, they will be used. Jonathan is suggesting that we call the area where 15, 16, and Booster 5 are the limbo zone. I like it.
Oh, it's purgatory for starships.
Let's see. What else can I pull out here? Here's a question we get a lot. Cuppa? I'm just gonna say Cuppa. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce your name. Sorry, bud. They say, could the small tanks be used to test chopstick catching and Starship hugger features of the tower? I don't think so. I think those small tanks are structural qualification test articles. That's a
Right.
fancy way of saying they're gonna pop them or they're gonna try to pop them.
Yeah.
And if you look at that FAA document that came out a little while back, SpaceX specified that they were going to be doing a lot of tank testing with a dedicated structural test stand. So, as much as vexing as it can be to see another test tank materialize, like we did see this week with Booster 6
Yeah.
parts, Booster 6 parts, and not even a thrust dome, a common dome. I mean, but point being, don't be surprised when you see more test tanks, and
Yep.
surely there'll be plenty more where that came from, even after the ones we've already seen, just because they have to do a lot of testing in order to get these designs nailed down. But I don't think we'll see them used for being caught or like being catch test articles. I feel like when they finally go to do a catch test, they'll use real hardware, and by real hardware I mean full hardware. I'm looking for some more questions. Stephanie Ball asking how many Raptors are ready for B5. We just don't know. We don't have insight into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that might be
It was
it.
a quieter week at Starbase, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So weird, right?
I know.
I mean, I hesitate to
what?
even say
Given everything
quiet
else this
because
week.
it really wasn't. It's just not. There wasn't any big, flashy like
Yeah.
static fires or anything.
It's sort of like, like the pace of the work continued, but it wasn't the big visual obvious work. It's the
Sure.
minutia of the smaller, some of the smaller stuff.
Although, you
that
know
just
what?
needs to keep happening.
Yeah, I'll make a point to that end though, because a lot of people point out, it's like, oh, the launch site is pretty much built up. The booster and the ship are out there. Clearly, SpaceX is very close to orbital launch readiness. And I will point out that the tank farm and the plumbing and the GSE, all the other GSE, and then the tower arms and all those things are not ready. They look ready, but they're not. There's been the very, minimal testing and things like that. And so it is worth pointing out that when there's a week like this where nothing really flashy happened, it means they're doing the things that are less visible and just as important for orbital launch readiness. And so the fact is, they probably made a lot of really important progress this week. And these are the kind of weeks that need to happen before all of a sudden there's an orbital stack fueling up on the launch site. So I'll make that point. It's
Exactly.
probably a very productive week.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Really quickly, Aaron Kemp, thanks for the support. They're saying I think astronauts should have a ranking based on time spent above the Kármán line. Paul Lepper.
There's probably a database somewhere that has that information.
That would make sense. Paul Leparty is asking, thank you for the support, bud. They say, is Elon still busy fixing Raptors? If not, why not? I suspect that is an ongoing situation that
Hmm.
will be remedied, but is probably currently in the process of being remedied.
Indeed. And you can see a live view here from Starbase and the orbital launch site where there's definitely vapors of some kind.
Adrian, pull out the spreadsheet. What does this mean?
I
Come
know.
on.
Well,
Orbital launch in 3
unsurprisingly,
weeks.
Adrian's the one who saw it first in our back channel. But yeah, got some venting going on there at the orbital launch site. So right on cue, as we've talked about, a bit of a quieter week activity. So
Also, Adrian says 2 weeks. My apologies, Adrian. Appreciate
It's
it.
it's always 2 weeks away. Just like Falcon Heavy is always 2 months away, or whatever it
6
was.
months. Falcon is always 6
six
months
months
away.
away.
Thank you.
The Elon presentation is always next year.
John, thank you for the support. They say off subject, but I got my Starship plushie delivered on SN8's anniversary. So
Nice.
awesome.
Oh, mine's. I'd have to get up from it.
Any ideas of a booster plushie for us hardcore nerds? There may or may not be more plushies in the pipeline. We'll find out in the future. But
Just have the Velcro separate your stages. No,
I like this idea. Have we sold out of those yet? If
I think we have a couple left.
you want your own Starship plushie, get it now, if possible, because they're going to be sold out super soon. I know I keep saying that. They keep not selling as fast as I thought they're going to do, but they sold pretty fast.
Yeah, they keep every time we mention them, the bunch sells. So
yes,
you know, time is running out, and there we go. There's the store plug. Thank you, Michael.
It's just one more Starship stream away from being sold out. So get it now while you can. But let's see. I'm looking at the document here. We have a James Webb update.
Oh, yes, we do. So everyone, deep breaths. T-minus 10 days and counting. 10 days from today, James Webb should be in orbit. Launch is currently tracking toward December 22nd at 12:20 UTC, which is 7:20 a.m. Eastern Time or 8:20 a.m. local time on the ground in French Guiana. Earlier this week, we had several updates from Arianespace and NASA, including the final fueling of the telescope ahead of liftoff, which is operations that you can see happening here inside one of the clean room environments down there at the Guyana Space Center. And then shortly after it was fueled, after Webb was fueled, it was moved for encapsulation into the Ariane 5 payload fairing, and then no pressure to this person, but now a crane operator has to pick that up and put it on top of the Ariane 5 rocket. And there are so many points along the way where we've held our breath. Obviously, no reason to think anything would go wrong, but it's just so many parts of this process are highlighted in different ways because of the immense complexity, but the incredible returns this mission could give us. And the first thing that has to work perfectly well is the launch of James Webb. And yeah, that's coming up here on December 22nd. And we have a bit of an announcement about some of our coverage for Webb.
Come on, Thomas. Jazz hands. Jazz hands, Thomas.
I will be going with our stuff to provide coverage of the launch. We are still waiting on and finalizing exactly what we will be able to do. And a lot of that will be determined when we are physically on the ground in French Guiana a week from today. But we do hope to have some special things for you all from there and with the rocket and with the liftoff. And I always said that I wanted to be there when James Webb launched. Didn't think that would happen because of coronavirus. Always wanted to see an Ariane 5 and be able to cover an Ariane 5 for this site. So very excited for that, and stand by for what we'll be able to do once we know a little bit more. But yes, our coverage will involve on the ground coverage of it to some degree.
Super awesome. I'm so happy for you, although at the same time, I am cripplingly jealous.
Yeah, right. Same here.
But I know that you will do NSF proud and we'll be able to have some awesome coverage in some form.
Yes.
That we'll find out about in the future. Just because you're there. And I'm so glad that because of the support of our members and the support of everybody, all of our super chatters, and your own hard work. Let's be real about it. Your own extremely hard work over years and years and years has resulted in the ability to cover this in person, which is just so cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm excited. I can't wait.
I believe it. I think with that, we will move on to our final item. Do you want to take that, Chris?
Yes, indeed. Earlier this week on Monday, NASA Spaceflight was honored by Space News with one of their Space News Awards for 2021, specifically for our growing coverage of a lot of things space, specifically our 24/7 coverage of Boca Chica and Starbase activities, as well as your trips to New Mexico, Jack, for some of the Spaceport America flights that we have seen and been able to cover this year, as well as Michael and Thomas and the partnership with Astros. So we were very humbled and very proud to have won one of these awards for our coverage of various events this year as well. So thank you to the Space News team for selecting us, and very honored. And we were also very honored to win an award alongside none other than very good friend of the channel and all around fantastic human being, Jonathan McDowell. It was kind of funny when Jonathan and I both popped up on screen together and went, "Oh, we're here together. Awesome." And Jonathan won the award for his tireless work of cataloging the entire low Earth orbit. Well, not just low Earth orbit, the entire orbital catalog of stuff that is up there. I think the way they put it during the award ceremony was someone who said, "You know what would make the world a better place? A complete list of everything in orbit." And then he did it and made it. So,
It seems
yes,
like it shouldn't even be a thing that an individual should decide that should exist. It seems like a thing that's a foregone conclusion that it should exist. So
you'd
thank
think.
yeah, right. So thank goodness that he has undertaken that, and thank you again to all of our members and everybody that's able to support us, that enables us to do coverage like stuff from New Mexico of Virgin Orbit, or sorry, Virgin Galactic, and our coverage of Boca Chica, which is, it's just so amazing that we're able to do this, and I cannot express my appreciation enough. But look what we can see here. Booster 4 is on the move towards the orbital launch mount. So sure enough,
This
it
is
looks
what
like,
we get. Yeah, but yeah, quiet week in Boca Chica, right, guys?
yeah, right. So it looks like they're going to pick up Booster 4 with the crane and plop it on the orbital launch mount. I suspect, given the time of day there in Boca Chica, that they'll do that tomorrow, but you never know. I would definitely keep your eyes on Starbase Live, and for further developments in this respect, because when we're done gabbing, you can still go over to Starbase Live and keep track of what's going on in Boca Chica, and that's part of what we won that award for, right?
Indeed, it is.
Yep.
Very
It's just a
cool.
big, just to echo, a big thank you to Space News for that recognition. It means a lot to us, and always humbled to be, recognized by another spaceflight news organization like that. And of course, a big thank you to McDowell and a congratulations to him as well as all the other winners. And a huge thank you to everyone's support of NASA Spaceflight here on the channel, over on the news site, everything like that. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, and while we're doing thank yous that are well deserved, thank you to Michael and Das for always being around to operate the streams, and Das for building the robots, and Mary for being out there every day covering stuff in the daily videos. And I mean, it's an entire team effort. Many people behind the scenes here, all pulling the strings and pushing the levers. But seriously, thank you to Michael and Das and Mary. That's invaluable assets to the NASA spaceflight team, and there's no way our coverage would look the same without any one of those three people. So cool. Really quick, Dougal, thank you for the congratulations and the support. Jay Moore, thank you for the support. They say safe travels, Chris. And DJ Esmeralda saying Booster 4 on the move to the orbital launch mount, which we just talked about. It's on the move. It's literally moving right now. I put my mouse on screen. I see the pixels changing. It's happening. Someone post the Ron Paul gif. Like, it's happening, lasers. Maybe we'll do maybe the Elon version. But with that, I think that's it for this week. Is there anything else we want to touch on?
I think that
It's gonna
we
be
should
one.
send. Yeah, I just think we should send people on over to Starbase Live to see what the heck they're going on with Booster 4.
Yeah, I know what I'm doing next.
Indeed.
So with that, I'm Jack Beyer with NASA Spaceflight. You've been listening to me blabber on all day today, but practically. But I was joined, in case you forgot, which I don't know how you would have, but in case you forgot, was joined by Chris Gebhardt. Chris, thank you for being on this week.
Oh, my pleasure. Happy to be here talking about all things space.
And Thomas Burghardt, thank you for being on this week.
Always a pleasure. Thanks everybody for watching.
All right, let's all go hang out in Starbase Live.
All right.
Have a good week, everybody. Oh, and before I forget, thank you, members. We have a little graphic that Michael, I assume, is going to bring up with the launch director memberships and the flight engineer memberships. Thank you so much to all of y'all. It's untenable to read off all of your names, but you're on the graphic there, so know that you are appreciated. And again, we could not do what we do without you. So
Absolutely not.
yep, sure enough. All right, let's go hang out in NSF Live. Take 2. I mean, oh my God, let's go hang out in Starbase Live. Just end it. Just end it.
See everyone next week.
We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be normal.
RCP chamber pressure looks good. Toggling up. Roger, roll, Atlantic.
Water towers fly!
Tango Delta nominal.
Flight down feed off. Bring in SCE off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.